I did a garden tour early July last year, so I wanted to do an update, another garden tour for 2013, just to give everybody an idea of some of the progress that's been made with the permaculture design site. Now what we're looking at here is this is the top swale that we're looking at, and it's at pretty much at the top of the property, and there's a timber area above where the trees are still real small over there, but that area is going to end up being a timber area. Now as we look over here, you can see we're in between the two longest swales, which are about 550 linear feet long each, and these swales have all been planted with trees, shrubs, supporting species. So these are the new layers and broilers, and these guys are going to be grazing in between the swales, so all that fertility that they create will be working its way down the hill through the swales, feeding the swales, and then therefore feeding all the plant material, and basically helping to reforest the property. But at this point they're still pretty young, so they're just going to be in the two little pods here, and we sort of move the pods along every couple days, but at some point here in the next maybe 3-4 weeks, when they're big enough, we'll get them in the electronet fencing. This is the back side of the house, which is pretty much a dead area. I haven't decided exactly what I want to do back here, mainly because what ends up happening is this gets heavy shade from the house, probably 9 months out of the year, maybe 10 months out of the year. And then in the heat of the summer, July, August time frame, it starts to get full sun. So there's not a lot of plants out there that love shade in the cold time, and then also like the super hot sun in the sun time. So I mean, it's very difficult to sort of figure out what would work in this microclimate. One of the things I am going to do is I'm going to put a few drains back here because we do get some standing water. I'm going to pull that water around the property here, and my plan is to have the swales connect and have that water, move that water around through the drains and around this corner to that little valley there, which we're going to have a pretty nice sized frog pond there. One positive development this year is that these large rootstock pear trees that I planted probably about 3-4 years ago, this is the first year they've actually gotten pears on them, so I'm looking forward to that. One thing I've noticed is that my large rootstock trees, my apples, my pears, I've had less problems with codling moth than I have on my dwarf rootstock stuff. So I'm not sure if there's a correlation there or not, but it wouldn't surprise me. I'm standing in one of the chickens' paddocks right now, and this year I have changed things around a bit to allow the chickens to interact a little bit better with the garden. So I actually have them rotating between 4 different paddocks. So every 7 days they're moving, and their paddocks are upslope from the garden, so all their fertility really helps with the garden, and they're also providing some pest control. And then also I've got a lot of my fruit trees in their paddocks, so they're providing the fertilizer and pest control for the fruit trees and benefiting from any fallen fruit. So this is one of the paddocks. There are 2 paddocks over there. You can see that kind of separated by a fence there. And as you come around, you can see this is one of my keyhole gardens here. You can see how that's nice and downslope from the chickens' paddock. I left the grass pretty long in the paddock area because the chickens like to eat the seeds. So, and then they also benefit from the shade because you have to look at things from their point of view. It's not shady to us, but it's shady to them when you're that low on the ground. But this is sort of their beginnings of the food forest. This is one of the other paddocks for the chickens, and this one is upslope of the Mandala garden, so the other side of the keyhole setup. And you can see we've got our fruit trees. You can see there's the movable chicken coop. This is the herb spiral and also the herb garden. I used to have my herbs in the terrace garden downslope from the house, but now it just made more sense to put all the herbs up front along the house, because now it's really convenient to harvest herbs whenever we need them. I think I have about maybe 15 to 20 different varieties of herbs for cooking in here. This is the Keyhole garden to the right of my greenhouse and shed, and basically I've got a small companion planted or polyculture planted keyholes, and every year I'll rotate them around. But this little first corner, there's a Three Sisters garden with watermelon, corn, squash, and pole beans. Then we've got some amaranth there on the backdrop, some marigolds and peppers and eggplant. It's another Three Sisters garden with a different variety of corn, beans and squash and watermelon. There's on the very end you can see the broccoli, and there's tons of onions and potatoes and sweet potatoes. And then of course we still have our strawberry patch, which did very well for us this year, although the strawberries look terrible now, as they normally do in the heat of the summer, but they'll perk back up again. And then on this side you see there's beans and lettuce. Now lettuce is bolting, but we still have that stuff there. Arugula, spinach, which is all bolting at this point. And there's some sweet potatoes here at my feet, which are doing real well. We also have the asparagus patch over here, which is companion planted with basil. And there's also some more eggplant and beans. And on the back side of the shed there, or the greenhouse, you can see there's actually a wildflower meadow that I planted there. That actually used to be grass. It's kind of an awkward area of just grass that had to be mowed all the time. So I planted that as a wildflower meadow. You can get a little better look at the wildflower meadow from the back side of the shed. And the thing I liked about doing a wildflower meadow sort of in the middle of the garden here, and it's kind of an awkward area anyway, and I didn't really want to plant it up to any sort of annual crops, is that it attracts all the pollinators. It's helping to bring in the predator insects, so it definitely helps with the diversity. I also did, this is my grapevine here, which is, has been there for a couple years now, but I used to have mulch underneath the grapevine, and now I actually planted Dutch white clover as a living mulch underneath the grapevine. And the grapes have done probably the best they've ever done this year. I don't know if that necessarily has everything to do with the living mulch, but it certainly hasn't hurt it, and I didn't have to mulch it, and so there's a little bit less cost and maintenance involved. So this is the left side of the terrace garden, and I have a couple of Hugelkultur sun traps that I put in, and there's some blueberries on top. I still need to finish planting the top. There's some other shrubs that I wanted to put in. I just ran out when I was doing the install for that stuff. And I've got a lot of Dutch white clover as a living mulch there. I've got tons of beans and carrots, and I had a bunch of radishes which we harvested, and there's also some lettuce, some different lettuces in there as well. I still have my Waterfall, which is great for the bees because they really do need to have water. And also I did plant some additional things around the Waterfall, some comfrey and some dill and some calendula and chicory and Dutch white clover and yarrow, so it's a nice little polyculture around the Waterfall. So we're still on the left side of the garden here, and you can see there's same clover, Dutch white clover walkway. I moved all my blackberries and raspberries up along the fence. They used to actually be right where this walkway is, right where we're sort of facing, and there was kind of a space on either side of a walkway, and it just seemed it was a big waste of garden space, I think. And so I ended up moving all that stuff. And in these keyholes we've got, you can kind of see the zucchini, there's marigolds, there's lettuce, there's sweet cucumbers, crystal apple cucumbers, which are real good. There's kale, which is still hanging in there, although it's pretty bitter at this point, so we haven't really been eating it. There was a bunch of sugar snap peas, but they're past their prime at this point. It's way too hot for them. This is actually the Mandala garden, which is kind of, it's kind of hard to see when you're down at ground level, so I'll get an overhead shot, but it's kind of a neat setup. There's a Three Sisters garden in here with sunflowers instead of corn. There's also some shorter blue jade corn, and that I'm using soybeans instead of pole beans because the corn is not quite strong enough to hold on to for the pole beans to hold on to. But there's also some bush beans, there's what's left over from the sugar snap peas, there's zucchini, there's tons of tomatoes and onions and marigolds and basil, and cilantro. There's also peppers. This will give you a different vantage point of the mandala garden. There's also tons of squash and cucumbers, carrots and onions.